What if the ocean didn't sink ships, but erased their stories? What if one day you stepped onto a vessel still floating, still working, still warm with recent human life, and yet not a single person was there to explain why? In the Atlantic, that story has a name, the Mary Celeste. But in the Pacific, there's a case that feels even stranger because it happened in a war zone, under surveillance, with radios, patrols, and maps. And still, it slipped through reality like it was never meant to be solved. Picture it, you're scanning a wide, empty ocean. The horizon is clean, no smoke, no flags, then a shape appears. A ship, small, old, drifting. You get closer and you realize it's not abandoned debris. It's intact, upright, not shattered, not burned, a fishing vessel, Japanese, and it's moving but not with purpose. It's just going. This happened in 1944. The ship was called the Fukuryu Maru, Lucky Dragon. It wasn't lucky at all. Here's the first fact that makes your brain tighten. When American forces found it near the Marshall Islands, the engine was still running. The boat wasn't dead. It wasn't wrecked. It was alive in the simplest mechanical sense. It had fuel. It had a working motor. It had food on board. It had clothing. It had tools. It even had fishing gear and personal items, the kind of everyday clutter that says, "We'll be back in a minute." But there was no crew. Not a body, not a struggle, not a message. No obvious damage. No storm-torn rigging. No blood on the deck, according to reports. Just a working vessel and an empty human space, like someone hit mute on a scene mid-sentence. And then there's the second fact. This wasn't some romantic age of sail where a ship could vanish between longitudes and nobody would notice for months. This was the Pacific theater of World War II. Patrols, aircraft, submarines, constant movement. The ocean was dangerous, yes, but it was also watched. So your mind starts building a hypothesis almost automatically. Something sudden happened. Something that made men leave a functioning boat. Because people don't abandon the only thing keeping them alive unless they believe something else is safer. Or they don't have a choice. Now your curiosity sharpens. If the engine was running, it means the disappearance wasn't a slow, starving drift. It suggests the crew left quickly or were removed quickly. If it wasn't weather, why leave? If it was an attack, where are the signs? If it was a rescue, why was the boat left unmanned and still powered? The deck becomes a puzzle board. The Pacific becomes a locked room. And once you accept the basic weirdness, the implications start multiplying. Because the war gives you too many possibilities. You start with the obvious. A submarine surfaced, armed men boarded, the crew was taken prisoner. That would explain the lack of bodies. But then you ask, why leave the engine running? Why not tow the boat? Why not sink it? In wartime, an unmanned vessel is not just clutter. It's a witness. A clue, a potential trap. It's something you control or destroy. Then you consider the opposite. Maybe the crew saw something and panicked. A plane, a ship on the horizon. Maybe they assumed it was enemy forces. Maybe they feared capture. In that moment, a lifeboat feels like a decision, like agency. But lifeboats in the open Pacific are almost always a death sentence. You don't voluntarily trade wood and fuel for waves and heat unless terror has made you irrational. Unless they thought help was close. Unless they misjudged distance. Unless they believed the boat itself was about to explode. And yes, that brings you to the third fact. Small fishing vessels often carried fuel and sometimes volatile supplies. Engines can backfire. Fuel vapors can build. A fire can start fast. A strange smell can make sailors imagine the worst. People have abandoned ships for imagined explosions before. The sea is full of stories where fear is the first storm. But again, you look back at the engine. Still running, not burned, no obvious blast. So you widen the net. What about carbon monoxide? Even today, people die on boats from fumes. An engine running, poor ventilation, sleeping quarters below deck. You can pass out quietly. You can die without drama. If some crew collapsed inside, maybe others tried to save them, got dizzy too, and ended up overboard. It's plausible. It's also maddening because if that happened, you'd expect bodies below or near the ship. But currents scatter everything. The Pacific is not just big, it is actively good at hiding. Then there's the fourth fact, the one that turns this from odd into sticky. The Fukuryu Maru is often described in American accounts as a ghost ship. And it wasn't an isolated vibe. Wartime waters produced multiple reports of drifting vessels with missing crews. Not all were supernatural mysteries. Many were simply the result of violent, chaotic conditions where people vanished faster than paperwork could follow. But each time it happened, the same question repeated. What makes a ship keep going after its humans are gone? Because a machine doesn't panic, a machine doesn't feel dread, a machine doesn't jump. And in a war, fear travels faster than facts. The more you investigate, the stranger the coincidences start to feel. The Marshall Islands were heavily contested. Submarines hunted. Aircraft attacked ships from above. Mines existed. And then there's the psychological atmosphere. Exhaustion, hunger, dehydration, the constant possibility of being seen and killed. Under that pressure, a simple accident can turn into a mass disappearance. Imagine one man falls overboard at night. Another goes after him. A third tries to throw a line and slips. The engine keeps pushing the vessel forward, slowly, steadily, separating the ship from the struggling silhouettes behind it. In calm conditions, this is still lethal. In the Pacific, it's brutal. Or imagine something even simpler. A squall hits. A wave knocks men off a slippery deck. The ship doesn't stop. Nobody is left to stop it. It becomes an empty instrument, carrying only evidence that no longer has a voice. Now you look for authorities. You want names, reports, something solid to hold on to. The story appears in wartime naval accounts and later compilations of maritime mysteries. It's connected, loosely, in public memory to the Mary Celeste because it has the same silhouette. A functioning vessel without people. Historians of the Pacific War have documented how common it was for small craft to be lost with incomplete records. The U.S. Navy kept extensive war diaries and action reports, but they weren't written to solve ghost stories. They were written to win a war. And on the broader question of missing crews and abandoned but afloat ships, maritime safety research gives you the unromantic mechanisms. Falls overboard, panic evacuations, fumes, sudden illness, rogue waves, navigation errors. Investigators of modern incidents often emphasize how quickly a chain of small mistakes can remove every person capable of controlling a vessel. And then you discover something else that changes your relationship to the mystery. The original Mary Celeste, the famous one from 1872, was also not solved by one dramatic explanation. Over time, the best reconstructions leaned toward mundane possibilities like alcohol fumes, fear of explosion, bad weather, or a botched evacuation. Not sea monsters, not time portals, just human judgment under stress. So you begin to feel the tide turning. Maybe the Pacific Mary Celeste isn't a single impossible event. Maybe it's a pattern you only notice because it feels poetic. And this is where the twist arrives, quietly, like a current shifting under your boat. Most experts don't need a supernatural explanation for the Fukuryu Maru. They don't even need a grand conspiracy. The dominant scientific and historical approach is this. In open water, people are fragile and ships are stubborn. An engine can run for hours or days. A hull can float even after everyone is gone. A vessel can look fine, even if something lethal happened fast and left little trace. In other words, the same facts that feel like evidence for a mystery are also exactly what you'd expect from a small, uncrewed boat. No one at the wheel, no one to cut the engine, no one to organize a response. The ocean doesn't need to smash the ship. It only needs to remove the humans. And wartime makes this more likely, not less, because crews are exhausted, because they take risks, because they travel at night, because they operate without the safety margins of peacetime, because an approaching silhouette might be an enemy, and fear can trigger decisions that look insane when you survive to write them down. So engine running stops being paranormal and becomes mechanical. A throttle set. A motor that keeps going until fuel runs low or the engine overheats. No damage stops being suspicious and becomes irrelevant. Many fatal events don't leave marks on wood. No bodies stops being a clue and becomes the ocean doing what it always does, dispersing. But the mainstream explanation doesn't close the case. It just changes the kind of uncertainty you're dealing with. Because if it was a simple accident, why did it take this exact form? How did every member of the crew end up gone? One man overboard is common. Two is tragic. An entire crew vanishing without leaving at least one survivor clinging to the boat's edge feels statistically rare, even if it's possible. If it was carbon monoxide or fumes, why wasn't someone found below deck? Maybe they were, but records are incomplete. Maybe the boarding party didn't document everything. Maybe details were lost in the noise of war. The absence of details starts to matter as much as the details themselves. And if it was fear, if they abandoned ship because they thought it would explode, or because they believed an enemy was seconds away, then the mystery is not what the ocean did. It's what the human mind did under pressure. A decision made in a few heartbeats that wiped out everyone who made it. That's the final conflict. You can explain the event without breaking physics, but you can't easily explain it without confronting how thin the line is between control and chaos. The Fukuryu Maru becomes a mirror. It asks you to imagine your own rationality on a dark deck, salt in your eyes, engine noise vibrating through your bones, the horizon hiding everything that might be coming for you. It asks you to consider that the ocean doesn't need to be supernatural to feel like it is. And maybe that's why stories like this spread. Not because they prove the impossible, but because they reveal something uncomfortable. Reality can look staged. A table can be set. A motor can hum. A ship can drift like a sentence that stops in the middle, and the universe won't rush in to finish it. You want closure, a neat answer, a final log entry, but the Pacific doesn't write epilogues, it edits. So when you think about the ship that never returned, you're not just thinking about missing sailors. You're thinking about how many human stories are held together by nothing more than routine, and how quickly routine can snap. And the next time you see a calm horizon, you might realize the most unsettling part is that a ship could become a ghost. It's that it only takes one ordinary moment for the living to vanish and leave the world, perfectly intact behind them.